Hello, I am David Tavares, Unreal Authorized Instructor Candidate and Creative Director for the studio Occupational Hazard. I have developed many types of games in Unreal Engine, including shooters, platformers, and role playing games. At the time of this recording, I am designing a vampire action RPG called Nightborne, which utilizes the Enhanced Input System that is the topic of today's tutorial. The Enhanced Input System is an advanced input plugin that allows for complex input handling, runtime control remapping, with backward compatibility with the default input system used in Unreal Engine 4. That is to say, the Enhanced Input System allows you to assign inputs, such as a mouse click or button press, to actions in your project or game. This tutorial assumes you already have Unreal Engine installed, know how to create a project, and grasp the fundamentals of using Unreal Engine. First, I'll go over the setup, then we'll cover the input actions, then we'll go over input mapping contexts, and then we'll apply to a blueprint character. By the end of this tutorial, you should be equipped with the knowledge to use the Enhanced Input System for inputs from a variety of game devices, and you should be able to come up with new combinations of device inputs for your own use. This tutorial will be done in Windows 11 on Unreal Engine 5.5.4, though the information presented should apply to most versions of Unreal Engine 5. You may follow along with any project that you have, yet for the purposes of demonstration, I'm going to create a blank games project with the project default set to Blueprint, Desktop, Maximum Quality with no starter content. Epic Games has provided some other sample projects here to use as a starting point. I'll be adding the third-person content pack after I create the project to demonstrate how to do that. Now that the project has been created, all you have to do to add that feature pack when you're already in a project is click Add, scroll up to Add Feature or Content Pack, select the feature or content pack you want. I'm going to choose the third person for demonstration purposes, and simply click Add to Project. It might take a second, but once it's in there, it will add the features to your content folder. It's a best practice to keep your file structure under the content folder. I'm going to create a new folder here called Enhanced Input. Most of what I'll be creating today will be in this folder, so you can stay organized. If for some reason you are not seeing some of the enhanced input features, make sure to check out under Edit Plugins whether the plugin is enabled. You can see here that the Enhanced Input plugin is enabled by default, but if for some reason yours is not checked, go ahead and check that and restart your project. The reason I added the third-person content pack is that you can see the Enhanced Input System in action. If I navigate to the third-person folder, I can see that there's this input folder as well. This shows an input mapping context. I'll be explaining that soon, and also another folder with actions showing the individual inputs. We'll be recreating all of these. You can also see in the blueprints folder that there is a third-person blueprint for a character. If I open that up, you will see that there's a bunch of blueprints, including a mapping to the Enhanced Input Local Player subsystem. We'll be recreating all this from scratch. But if you ever get lost, you can always go back to one of these templates and look around, explore it, tool around, figure out how it works. You can see that there's different enhanced input actions mapped here, including jump, move, look, and this one's what? Event, receive, controller change. Now, I'll put this aside, and if you go to your world settings, and you go to game mode override, since I added this third-person content pack, I have this BP third-person game mode. So I'm going to select that, hit play, and using the Enhanced Input System, this character can run, jump. I'm using the WASD keys, my mouse to look around, space bars for jumping. Now let's recreate this ourselves. One more thing that I like to do is, since this is a new project, you might not need to do this if it's an existing project, but you're going to want to save this map somewhere so you don't lose your progress. I'll just call this Enhanced Input Map. I'll add a new folder here called Maps. Go inside there and save. Now let's go back to the Enhanced Input folder. Also create another folder in here called Actions. Enter that folder. Then in the content browser, right-click, choose Input, Input Action. What an input action is the communication between the input and the code. It's best to maintain a good naming scheme. So IA underscore move, for example. Why did I name this input action move? It's because this is going to be the input action which drives the character's basic movement, using WASD keys, perhaps the arrow keys as well. Let's open it up, see what's inside here. You have this action description. This is optional. I put in here move character. There are some functions here. Trigger when paused. Normally you leave this unchecked. You would only check it if you wanted this action to, as the name describes, trigger when paused, like a menu item instead of like a character movement. If there was character movement, that would look pretty awkward during pause. Reserve all mapping. That means this particular action will override any other function that might be using the same mapping. Value type is one of the more important things here because this is going to be changed. There are 4 options. Digital bool, bool being true or false. That's normally reserved for a button press, whether it's being pressed or it's not being pressed. There's axis float, that's various values along a float. There is 2D vector, that's what we'll be using because there will be 2 dimensions, forward, back, left, right. There's also the 3D vector, that's for like motion controls, that sort of thing. So we're going to go with the 2D vector. And the rest of this we will leave the same. It will consume lower priority enhance input mappings. If it's lower priority, it should be consumed, meaning this is the one that's the priority. And everything else is as it should be. The other actions we'll be creating are a look action, a jump action, and a crouch action. So if you right-click on that move action, you can duplicate it as a faster way to make a new input action. And I can write look as the name of this new one. Now, I don't need to change anything about it because it's already in Axis 2D. We already changed it to that. You can duplicate again. And this one, it will be jump. Now this one will have to be changed. It's not an Axis 2D. A jump is either you're jumping or you're not. So that's back to a bool. Save that. And there's another bool that we're going to create. So I'll duplicate this one more time. And it'll be crouch. Now you have your 4 actions. If you want to save them all, you can click Save All right here. And now on to the input mapping context. Now it's time to create an input mapping context. Go to your Enhanced Input folder, right-click in the content browser, select Input, scroll to Input Mapping Context. This is going to be the container that's going to be the collection of all your input actions that you created earlier. I'm naming mine IMC_tutorial. You should name it something that's appropriate to your project. I'll open that up. There are 2 sections here. One's for the description and one's for the mappings. There'll be 1 mapping for each of your input actions. I'll start with the most complex one, which is the IA move that we just created. If you expand this, you'll see that there's a key value here. You can either select it during the scroll down. You can see there's a whole bunch of different values that you can select. It shows keyboards, gamepads, mouse, lots of different inputs. For the purpose of the move action, we're going to do WASD. So let's start with W. You can press to add another one. Here you can just select the key value. So I believe I hold A. All I did was hold down A and press this button, and now it filled it in with A. I can do S and D. Triggers are the qualifiers for when the mapping will not trigger unless there's this trigger value. We don't need any of those at this moment. Now, the reason I said this is a more complex one is because remember that IA move, we can look back to it, is a 2D access. But I'm going to want to get 1D values. There's going to be an X and a Y. So by default, X is forward. So X is going to be right for us. So there's going to be no modifier to it. Now we're going to split this 2D into 1D. So on WASD, D is right, A is left. So we're going to add a modifier to A, which is negate. And expand that. Make sure that they're all checked. Negate means going into the negative. So positive is to the right, negative is to the left. W, S, that's forward and backward. So for forward, we're going to want to do something called a swizzle. So you're on the x-axis as XYZ. You're going to want it to be Y as the forward. So what you do is add a modifier and add swizzle input access values. Swizzle being the changing from X to another axis. So Y, X, Z. Y is forward now. So now we're talking about the Y value. So we're creating this 1D input into a 2D space. And for S, which is backward, you're going to want both swizzle and negate, both of these, because now it's the opposite of this swizzled value. So you add 2 to the modifiers. You can add that swizzle, making sure that it's Y forward. And then in the second one, you can hit negate. And that should do it for the move input action in the input mapping context. Now we can map these same actions to different inputs. So we've got WASD. Now that works for somebody who, like me, is right-handed. Let's say someone's left-handed and puts their mouse pad on the left side and they like to use the arrows instead. So we can add 4 more inputs here. And let's do up. That work? Yep, up. I held down the up key. You can also find them here, the different keys. So that was up. You can search for down, keyboard down. And I'll just do left and right. There we go. And you're going to want to fill these out the same way as you did these. So forward would be swizzle. up being forward modifier, swizzle, down being swizzle and negated, left being negated, and right not needing any modifier. Now you don't have to split the axis with some types of inputs. An example here, I'll add an additional input for a gameplay controller. Now a gameplay controller, actually I have one right here, has these thumbsticks that can move in X and Y directions. So because of that, I can go here, add a new input, gamepad, left thumbstick 2D. See, it allows you to split them into X and Y, but you don't have to. You can just do a 2D access. Now, because of that, and the fact that it's not just a button press, but I can push it with various values, there's a couple special modifiers that I'd like to add here. First is the dead zone. This clamps it to a value between 0 and 1, so you don't get any weird values from the device. And the other value that I'd like to add as a modifier is scalar, which sets the input by a factor per access so that you can actually move it, slightly and such, rather than it just being a button press. I'll make it feel a little bit more natural. Let's add some more input actions. Up here in mapping, you could press the plus to add another input action. Let's add the look, input action look. We can use the mouse, XY 2D axis. You could use just X or Y, but we're going to do 2D so that we can do both forward, back, look, looking in every direction. The look input action is just when you're looking, not moving, so you can see all around your character in this context. And we're going to invert the mouse. So to do that, if you don't want to invert the mouse, simply don't do this. But I like my mouse inverted, so I do negate. And for the controller, we're going to add gamepad, right thumbstick 2D. We already mapped the left thumbstick to movement, so for looking around, it's going to be this. And make sure to add a modifier here for a dead zone, so it's clamped between the values of 0 and 1. Now I can also add the input action for the jump function. So I can add this here, minimize these again. Input action jump likes to expand on its own, so I will add the space bar for one input, and the other input will be gamepad. Let's do face button bottom. And there shouldn't be any modifiers for these. Now we'll have one more input action here. And this is our new one for the crouch. Now for crouch, I think I will use the C button. So how about C on the keyboard? That's a common one for crouch. Sometimes people use shift or control. And for my gamepad, how about the face button left? These things can be variable. Sometimes gamepad has like pressing down or the left joystick, like pressing it in. I believe face button left will work fine, though, for our purposes today. Now that we have enough in our input mapping context to demonstrate what we're trying to show today, let's go back to our content browser here. If you have a folder named characters, that's a good spot to do this because we're about to create a new character from not exactly from scratch, but from the blueprint class that's character. This comes with a lot of out-of-the-box blueprints that already kind of make a character. I'm going to name mine blueprint underscore enhanced input system EIS character. But name your character as appropriate for your purposes. I can open up this character and you'll see that it has some things like the capsule component, an arrow, and a mesh component, but the mesh component is blank. So let's add some of the default meshes here we can choose from. I'm going to choose Quinn Simple, and you can tell that she's higher up than she should be. So rotate her 270 degrees and -98 for the height, so she fits within the capsule. And you can see that she's A-posing right now. So what you should do is make sure that in the animation mode under the Depose panel, that the animation blueprint for ABP Quinn is selected, and you can see she is animated. We're going to need one more thing to test this out before we start with our code, and that is the camera. Notice there's no camera attached to this character. So go add component, do spring arm, make sure this is attached to the capsule. And then add component to that, which should be a camera. Just the normal one, Cine camera is not necessary for this. And you can name this follow camera, and you can rename the spring arm to camera boom. And set this value to 8.5, so it's slightly above its mid section here. You notice we just moved it up and reset the rotation so it's behind the character. And that should do it. We have a camera now on our character. Now let's start adding the code. Go to the event graph. First thing to do is to add input mapping. Right click and look for event perceive controller change, this one right here. Now, as a new controller, you're going to want to cast to player controller so that we know that there is a player controller active that is valid. And then look for enhanced input local player subsystem. This is going to initialize the enhanced input controls here. And then add mapping context. And this is where the mapping context comes in that we just created. So I'm going to look here, the IMC tutorials, the one that I created. So now all of those actions that we mapped are now associated with this character. Hit compile and save. As a best practice, go ahead and comment out this code. Add input mapping. Now let's add some camera input. So let's do enhanced input action look. like this. You can expand. You can split this action value here so that it shows X and Y. Now you're going to want to do two things upon triggering this action. You're going to want to add controller yaw input for the x-axis. And you're going to want to add controller pitch input for the y-axis. You can collapse this again and they'll remain together. And as long as they are all connected, you should now be able to look with this character. Comment this out. It's camera input. And to test it out, go back to your world settings and swap out the blueprint in your game mode, selected game mode, default pawn class. Change it to the BP that you created. So I created this enhanced input systems character. So I hit play. And look, I can look around. Now I can't walk yet because I haven't added those inputs yet, but I can look. I was able to look left and right, but I wasn't able to look up and down, and that is because that camera boom that we created earlier, go back to that. And under this setting, under details, use pawn control rotation. It was overriding that. So now I can go back, and now I can look all around. Much better. Now we can create our input action move. So you can run around, split the action value so that we have the X and the Y. So you're going to be moving the capsule component, and the X is the right-left value. So go ahead and get right vector for that. And the X is going to add movement input based on that rotation. So you move in that direction. And then the same with the Y. Add movement input. But it's the capsule component. Get forward vector is the direction that you're moving that. So let's clean these up. And this is the movement input. We can test that out now. Moving forward and backward, right and left. We can also add the input action jump. Instead of triggered, we're going to use started and completed. So at started, we're going to get function jump. And on completed, we're going to stop jumping. Comment this out as jump input. And we can test this. Jump. Seems to work. Now that you know the basics of the enhanced input system, feel free to try out new input variations. It can take some experimentation to get the feel right. I will be using the enhanced input system in many of my future, more advanced videos, so now you have a good foundation. The official Unreal Engine documentation has more information on the enhanced input system. Other resources include YouTube, the Epic Development Hub community, and the Learning Portal.